Hi, my name is Robert Wen from Salesforce. Thank you for joining today's presentation at Spinnaker Summit 2020. In the following presentation, I'm delighted to share with you our use of Spinnaker as a deployment orchestration tool. Let me start sharing. Today's presentation is about our journey to Spinnaker deployment orchestration. In this presentation, the story is about migrating from a legacy CI/CD environment to Spinnaker CD. A little bit about myself. I'm part of the Einstein Production Engineering Group. My responsibility is primarily about CI/CD, DevOps, developer productivity. Mainly me and my team responsible for the CI/CD pipelines for our group. A little bit background of this presentation. In our team, we have been operating a legacy CI/CD using TeamCity. It's been going on for quite a while, for over the years. We encounter more and more challenges facing the CI/CD, primarily because of the growth of business, the growth of engineering activities. So TeamCity serves as both a CI/CD solution. One of the main problems is able to access to production environments. On this point, does fail the least privileged principle. It's difficult to enforce consistent permission and deployment policies. When it comes to release time, gating the release requires constant monitoring and manual actions. As a result, deployment orchestration was becoming a much higher priority. This is a current diagram representing the old way or the legacy way of CI/CD. Basically, both CI/CD are implemented by TeamCity. As we can see, the GitHub is the source control. We trigger build from GitHub. In TeamCity, do the constructions, building of binaries, and testing. In turn, TeamCity publish the artifacts to Docker registry and Artifactory. TeamCity also serving as a deployment tool. So it would deploy the targeted image into our Kubernetes clusters. In Kubernetes clusters, we group the clusters in terms of environments. So have dev environment, staging, RC, and production. As you can see, it does directly can deploy to production. That's one of the issues we like to address. In the new way of CI/CD is we separate CI from CD. TeamCity primarily still serves a CI solution, while Spinnaker will take over the continuous delivery. As you can see from this diagram, again, in CI space, TeamCity will take the source code from GitHub and do build testing, then publish to Docker registry and Artifactory. On the CD side, Spinnaker will listen to the change in Docker registry, and for depending upon the application's configuration and pipeline configuration, it will trigger a new deployment into Kubernetes clusters for different environments. Each pipeline for different environment may be adjust differently, depends on the pipeline policy. So there are several phases in this journey. First, we install the Armory Spinnaker, and then we prepare prepare the deployment jobs in In Spinnaker, in this phase, we first need to identify active deployment jobs in TeamCity, and more importantly, communicate with all stakeholders about change in architecture, policies, and processes. In the next construction phase, we construct matching deployment pipelines in Spinnaker. Matching, this means matching the existing deployment jobs in TeamCity. And lastly, during the release enhancement phase, we enforce change control records, rollback policies, and issue tracking integration. In first phase, we set up the Spinnaker in as Kubernetes clusters. There's some core features: application management, application deployment, pipelines, and Kubernetes provider. So these are core features we install. And second important feature is for the OFC, for role-based access control. Why do we need that? Well, one main reason is we restrict access to applications, pipelines, and accounts. It's very difficult to achieve those objectives in the legacy CI/CD using TeamCity. We also can customize permissions for automatic and manual pipeline triggers. And of course, another very important aspect of this is we need this feature to meet security requirements. Another key feature we need to install for Spinnaker is pipeline as code. So pipeline configurations are defined in GitHub, and pipeline changes require pull request review, just like you developing code for an application or server. With pipeline as code, we can restrict who can apply code change. All these features combined will help to meet the change control requirements. In preparation phase, we need to identify active deployment jobs in TeamCity. Based on our research, the number of application services, there are total 20 plus, and number of environments will have 5 plus environments, including production. And we start with the release records. Then look for the configurations that include build steps that call Helm commands. There exists Helm charts. They are accessible from Spinnaker. Of course, then obviously we need to identify those Helm charts. Those Helm charts will be used by Spinnaker as well. This is a typical example when we look at TeamCity configuration. We look up the build steps involved invoking Helm client. Well, during preparation, it's very, very important to communicate the migration plan to all stakeholders. We need to engage all stakeholders about configuration changes and, more importantly, expectations. So what changes are coming? It's very important to communicate with all stakeholders. Some of the key changes are coming are including standardization. So our team own the pipeline templates. It's easier to support organization, onboard new service, and audit. We implement opinionated permissions. What I mean is we define well-defined groups and access control. We start from scratch and configure opinionated permissions. Some example is, for example, productions can only trigger by dedicated personnel. Pipeline as code. Changes configurations are review pull request process. We separate CI from CD, so TeamCity remain serving the build and test, and we remove the ability. We remove the TeamCity ability to deploy. we help to achieve automated releases. What that means, we integrate with end-to-end tests in pipelines, coupled with rollback and issue tracking integration. In this construction phase, in this phase, we are constructing the pipelines. For each active application service in production, we must standardize the pipelines. What that means is including the following. We carry forward and enforce the same release process from the legacy CI/CD environment. So the same release process, one reason we do that is we have the same release process, but it was difficult to enforce in the legacy CI/CD system. That pipeline auto-deploy when new that build is published, staging pipeline triggers if that deployment test pass. Production pipeline trigger conditions include passing staging deployment tests and manual judgment by release manager or authorized personnel. Another key aspect of doing construction is use pipeline as code. We create GitHub repo for pipeline code. We enable pull request review and define common pipeline stage modules. For example, baking, create namespace, deploy manifest, restrict window, and invoke integration tests. So for each active application or service in production, we coordinate moving deployment jobs to Spinnakers with mainly developers and SREs and project managers. We test the Spinnaker pipeline. Once it works, we disable its corresponding deployment jobs in TeamCity. We inform the service step teams about pipeline update and announce progress to all stakeholders. This is, again, a very critical aspect of migrate this journey to migrate to Spinnaker to ensure a smooth experience for all stakeholders. We must communicate very well each phase of the migration. This is a sample pipeline execution. I can see this is we have a first phase find the Docker image from another pipeline. We use its version to do baking the manifest, and then we deploy. We have also a manual judgment for deployment. In this case, particularly important for production deployment. And then we deploy the service itself. After deploying service, we run the integration test, also notify the Datadog. So each of this deployment, there will be a Datadog event, so we can review and keep track. Here's some sample modules, just representing the previous slide. So there's module to find the Docker image. There's the bake module for baking the manifest, and for the creating namespace and deploying the service itself, followed by this is a trigger, typical a cron trigger happened to be on Wednesday 3:15. During the migration to Spinnaker, we might discover pipeline complexities, which change from one service to the other. We need to clarify the pipeline dependencies and deploy manifest types with the development teams. During this process, we have been improving shareable modules to allow easier module reuse. For example, including background jobs in deploy manifest stage. Another example is customize the stage to call tests in TeamCity. So this is just some sample module. For example, on the left-hand side, we have a module which just deploy background jobs. What that means is the deploying the application service does not depend on completion of the background jobs. The background jobs will continue, like a cron job, continue over time. However, the deploying that application service does depend on the init jobs. Only if the init jobs, and in this case, sample app will continue deployment. And on the right-hand side, just an example of background job in Spinnaker module code. We can say, we can specify that this job doesn't fail the pipeline. The next aspect of construction is where you need to collaborate closely with dev teams. We provide up-to-date status on a regular basis. We communicate with all dev teams about Spinnaker pipeline progress. These are following key points we need to communicate, including how non-prod pipeline works, how to deploy to prod, how scheduled release and hotfix release work, what permission policy change impacts deployments, and the benefits in the new Spinnaker deployments, which is something is very difficult to achieve in the legacy CI/CD using TeamCity. And last but not the least, we need to update the release playbook. Therefore, and all the stakeholders will be aware of the upcoming changes in regular release, hotfix, or e-release. During the release enhancement phase, with Spinnaker as deployment orchestration tool, we are able to enable touchless, contactless releases. What I mean by that is, in the legacy environment, there are more coordinations, meetings, make sure that we release on time, make sure that all the dependency between pipelines are implemented and enforced. With Spinnaker, we can define this in the Spinnaker configurations for application services and pipelines. Therefore, not just reduce number of meetings, also can enforce these policies regarding dependency between pipelines, as well as permissions against service accounts or user accounts. As a result, we require less release meetings. We streamline, schedule, ad hoc, and hotfix releases. We are able to enable automatic post-deployment validation tests. We prevent unexpected release failure due to lack of change control in legacy CI/CD. As a result, we are also able to achieve more reliable and repeatable deployments. In conclusion, just what is what, why, how about this journey? We separate CI and CD. We enforce deployment security policy, change control, pipeline standardization. We are able to streamline release processes for scheduled and unscheduled deployments. We identify all existing active deployment pipelines in legacy CI/CD in TeamCity. Based on that, we set up standardized pipelines in Spinnaker. In the meantime, we keep TeamCity serving CI while manage CD in Spinnaker. With all this effort during this journey, we continue to improve the pipelines and modules. And as a result, the new service, new applications, or new engineering activities with Spinnaker as deployment orchestration, we are able to improve onboarding new service, updating existing services, and more importantly, deliver value for our stakeholders. As a result, we can be more confident in expanding our engineering activities in order to meet the business growth. Thank you. I'm happy to hear more questions or input. Feel free to reach out to me. Hope you enjoy the rest of Spinnaker Summit.